All right, welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Campfire with me and Steven. It's a little weird looking right now because we're not in the barn and Steven's not really across from me. Like he's not over there. He's on the screen. It's an adjustment.
Yeah. Well, we had to catch the killer of O.J. Simpson's wife, who passed away today.
I know. It's so good that he can rest easy knowing that her killer is dead.
Right.
Dude, I've been seeing so many memes going on about that right now. Like, there's been some where it's like they took a Ford Bronco and turned it into like like a hearse, and
No
they're
way.
like, yeah, like OJ Simpson, his funeral procession. And they got like all the cop cars driving by them.
Oh my goodness, people are insane, dude. I tell you, it's interesting. I'm confused of like whether he's one of the most like hated or one of the most like I wouldn't say he's loved.
No,
No, yeah, no, he's not.
dude,
Yeah,
I'm gonna tell you. Okay, if people are sitting there like, oh, OJ Simpson died today, I wonder if the Beyond the Campfire is ever going to cover the conspiracy of whether or not he did it. You think we're stupid? We're not going to cover that. We all know he did it. You know what I actually found out about OJ Simpson?
what'd you
Do
say?
you I said, "Do you know what I found out about OJ Simpson?
What's that?
Do you know why the glove didn't fit?
Why is that?
Because he stopped taking his arthritis medicine, so his hand swelled up."
Oh, I've heard a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, I have to go. I haven't actually looked at the case in depth, but yeah, I don't know if it's worth putting on a conspiracy podcast.
No. Did
Like,
you know he also
every,
wrote a book?
oh,
He
I think I heard about that.
Yeah, he wrote a book. Basically, the premise of the book was like, I didn't do it, but if I did do it,
He's he was such a ball. Well, he was
dude,
more. Well, he was a murderer, but that's
yeah, he
topic.
had big balls though, that's for sure.
But yeah, let's get right into it. Our topic for today is Georgia cryptids.
Oh boy.
So, at the risk of me and Will getting doxxed, we both live in the state of Georgia. I'm not going to say where we live in the state of Georgia.
Listen, the best thing we can say is that you live near Atlanta and I live near Savannah. I mean, I could literally be 3 hours away from Savannah.
We can leave it at that. Yeah. But anyway, living in the state of Georgia, we are very interested in some of the creatures that may be lurking in the woods of this state down south. So,
My backyard.
in your backyard, yeah.
My backyard, man.
Yeah.
You saw that deer. You
Of
saw that
course,
deer leg.
skinwalkers.
You saw that deer leg.
I did see that deer leg.
Dude, I like okay, so we went out in the pasture. If you did not see the picture on our Instagram, um there was like me and Maddie, we saw there were some vultures in our pasture, and being the farmer I am, I got to go defend my livestock because black vultures kill calves.
For
And
sure.
like I shot at them, they flew away, and I was trying to figure out what they were trying to eat, and there was like just this severed deer leg. I don't get it. Like there's no deer, there was no body. It was just a fully intact deer leg just sitting in the pasture.
A skinwalker definitely got it.
Oh yeah.
Which we still got to do an episode on that one day. But
Actually, I do have some news for everybody. Since we missed 2 weeks, the way the episodes are going to be is a little thrown off. So episode 26 would have been our like halfway mark, but since we've missed 2 weeks, it'll actually be episode 24. Episode 24, I will be covering the Skinwalker for our 6 month anniversary.
well planned ahead because this is what episode 4 or 5.
This is 5.
This is 5. See, I'm starting to lose track. But okay, yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and kind of get into it. So, the South, there's a lot of weird creatures here. There's a lot of weird things that have come, and so I'm going to talk about 3 cryptids, and I'm going to talk about one, not really a cryptid, but a creature, maybe with a human.
Maybe. It's
Yeah.
funny because Steven texted me. He goes, "Oh, I got 2.5 cryptids, and then the third one, we're not going to say what it was." I was like, 2.5 cryptids, and my wife goes, "How can you have 2.5 cryptids?" I said, "Well, maybe one's a midget."
We'll see. Yeah, I say 2.5 because two of them are very related to each other, and so my theory is they're actually the same cryptid, but
Mm,
you know, some people think they're different cryptids, but we'll get into that in a second. So our very first cryptid uh, is actually very, very similar to the Loch Ness Monster.
my
But
favorite. I love this cryptid. This is one of my favorite Georgia
yeah,
cryptids.
so I am probably going to butcher the name of this, but we are talking about the Altamaha water monster.
Do you
Or,
know how it's pronounced, Stephen?
what?
The
How do you,
Altamaha.
what is it?
Altamaha.
Altamaha. Okay, I overcomplicated
And then
that.
what's funny is the name of the cryptid makes it even funnier because it's the Altamahaha Monster.
That's what I was gonna say. I thought there was two ha-has at the end, like almost
So
as
so the river is just Altamaha, but the monster is the Altamahaha. I don't know
oh,
why they added an extra ha at the end.
well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, so it's called the Altama. How do you say it again?
Altamaha.
Altamaha. Okay,
Hmm.
the Altamaha, and the creature's called the Altamahaha.
Right.
I love that. Yeah. So for those of you that are not from Georgia, the Altamaha River is located in southeastern Georgia, and um, yeah, it is where this creature has been spotted several times since at least the 1830s.
I didn't realize it went back that far. Hmm.
Yeah, and kind of when I was looking at the list of Georgia cryptids, like some of them have only been seen once or twice, and it was like in 2008. So I'm like, okay, this is not really something worth.
Somebody got drugged up because they weren't happy that Obama won the election and started seeing things.
There you go. Um, but with this one, I'm just like, okay, several sightings spanning centuries at this point. 1830s. We are here in the year of our Lord 2024, and people are still seeing this thing. Like if you go to the Altamaha right now, there's probably a decent chance you're gonna see this thing in some shape or form. So it's pretty well documented. People continue to see it today. People have seen it for the last 200 years, and even before European settlers started coming here and documenting it, there was reports from Native Americans
Hmm.
seeing this creature. So, you know, out of the two of us, Will is the wild, unhinged conspiracy theorist. I'm more of the skeptic of our cowboy and Indian duo. But even me as a skeptic, with this much documentation, which we'll get to in a second, and these many reports, I'm like, okay, there's something here. There's something here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get into the first documented report. So, uh, the first non Native American report was made on April 18th, 1830, when a correspondent from a Savannah, Georgia newspaper reported multiple sightings. It's
See,
not just one.
that's the kicker there is that it's not like some methed up drunk redneck, you know, fishing in the river like, "Ah, I saw that monster." No, this is like some professional like newspaper boy from the
Right, yeah. No,
city.
this is not a Will the Cowboy on a Thursday night. This is or
This
a
is a
Friday night.
Stephen David.
Right, yeah. This is law student Steven Sahil going out and seeing something weird. So, but yeah, 1830. Um, this correspondent's going around. He's gathering all of these things, and there was a few eyewitnesses. I'm going to focus on the primary one, but the primary one was Captain Delano of the ship called the Eagle, who reported seeing a large creature off of Saint Simon Island, kind of right below the Altamaha River.
Hmm.
So again, not some rando, not some like drunk
No.
guy or homeless person. This was a captain of a ship,
Yeah.
and he described the creature as being 70 feet long, having the circumference of the size of a barrel, and his head resembling that of an alligator. There's also 5 other men on the ship that reported seeing the same monster. So, Will, what are you thinking is going
Well,
on?
my thoughts are is like you can look at it, sorry, I have like a hair on my mic. I got it. Anyways, like the thing with the Altamahaha is like, obviously it's kind of like the Loch Ness monster, but what's really interesting is to think, 1830s, right? It's not like, old Captain over here pulled out his iPhone 12 and was like, "Oh man, everybody's talking about the Loch Ness monster. I'm going to say I saw the same thing." So it really like gives you credibility here to say 1830s, you can't really copy the Loch Ness monster, and it kind of makes you wonder like could the Loch Ness monster and this creature be connected? Which I guess there's like a couple theories that like,
That's some fun history for you in just a second, but
oh
keep
yeah.
going.
Oh yeah. So like, I think that it could be true just because I know that some like obviously we'll talk about this in a conspiracy episode that I want to cover in the future because I want to cover it. But like, there's things at the bottom of the ocean that like we don't know what could be down there. Could a plesiosaur from prehistoric times have survived somehow in the ocean after the meteor hit and that it's, swimming up and down the coast and everything, and that it's also the because that's like we'll obviously talk about the Loch Ness monster later, but they've actually found caves underneath the Loch Ness like the Loch Ness. Um that like something could have hid down there. So like, I think it adds credibility that is a newspaper, and that is a sea captain. It's not just like some bozo who was drinking in his trailer, doing some meth, decided to go down the river and saw a log floating and thought he saw, a monster.
Yeah, no, for sure. Here's where the skeptic in me comes out a little bit. So some of the earliest inhabitants of um, this town, today it's called Darien, Georgia, but some of the earliest settlers of it were from Scotland, which where was the Loch Ness? Where do we find the Loch Ness monster being
Loch
from?
Ness monsters in Scotland.
It is, yeah, and many of the settlers were from kind of the same area where the Loch Ness monster was spotted. So the skeptic in me was like, okay, these Scottish guys saw something weird in Scotland. They're coming here to Georgia and they're up to their same tricks. I'm like, okay, they saw something weird there. They're seeing something weird here. I'm like, these are just weird people. Like
Yeah.
that are monsters. Um, Here's where the skeptic in me started to wear off. I mean, like I said, I've already mentioned kind of the Native American reports prior to settlers coming there. But secondly, I'm going to very speedily just go through the history of kind of this monster like being sighted. So for a while, we don't really see anything again after the 1830s incident, but about 90 years later in the 1920s, there's another sighting. There's a timberman guy who uh, reported sighting a large snake-like water monster. So sounds kind of similar to the
Yeah.
Altamahaha. You know, uh, 15 years after that, 1935, a group of hunters spotted what they called a giant snake swimming through the Altamaha. In 1940, the Boy Scouts reported seeing the creature, as well as two officials from Reedsville State Prison in the 1950s.
Now you know them Boy Scouts ain't telling a lie, man. You gotta trust the Boy Scouts.
For sure. I I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, why was there this big gap for the 90s? If this creature exists, you would think you would find it. My theory is, you know, probably once the settlers had gotten kind of settled, they're kind of starting to mostly focus on other things. I think by the time you get to the 1920s and 30s, industrialization is happening.
Mm-hmm.
You start to see a lot more growth of cities, you start to see a lot more ruckus, and so all of a sudden, you start having like trains come by, things come by. If the Altamahaha exists, I think it's starting to get bothered by some of these things. I think it's starting to come out
Yeah.
a lot more. And so, whereas you have the 1830s incident, as you get into the 1920s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, this creature showing up over and over again, my explanation is like, hey, yeah, if I was a giant river sea snake thing in the Altamaha River and I'm hearing all these noisy humans, I would start to show
Mm-hmm.
up a little bit
Well,
more.
I guess that kind of goes into my theory. My theory kind of was when you're like, okay, there's this gap. like the whole entire Altamaha River, it's a pretty wide, it's a pretty long river, so there's no telling if like the Altamaha went further up river because all these people are moving in. And then, as people are industrializing, like you said, all these cities are popping up, infrastructure, boats coming through. I mean, this thing probably got a little pissed at people, It's like, man, I'm trying to take a nap, the kids are bothering, like
Yeah,
wife's put me in the doghouse, and guess what? A tugboat's coming through.
yeah, no, that would definitely awaken something in me. So I'm gonna wrap up the Altamahaha because we have two other cryptids and then another creature to talk about. Um, but yeah, the Altamahaha really started to become very popular in the 1980s. This is, what you could call the Altamahaha's viral moment. So 1980s, obviously TV starting to become a big thing, but yeah, 1981, a newspaper publisher named Larry Gwynn reported seeing the creature while fishing with his friend Stephen Wilson. They said it had two big humps about 5 feet apart and left behind a wake that was the size of a speedboat. Newspapers across the country started to report this sighting, and other witnesses started to come forward. It really seems like the reason that was the case was Larry Gwynn had newspaper connections really across the country. Like again, this was
Mm,
not just some hobo, but this was a guy with well established credibility, connections across the country. So if he's saying he saw some kind of sea monster there, people are going to pick up on that.
yeah. I mean, I guess it's kind of like one of them things where, like, when the newspaper's picking up on it, I feel like the crazy thing, like with the 1830s case, that I could definitely see being a thing, and with some of these people popping up saying, "Oh, we saw it," and then like we were saying, the connection to Scotland, maybe there was some, maybe there is, maybe the Loch Ness monster is real, maybe these people that came over, maybe something hitched a ride on one of their boats, maybe it was like a little baby Loch Ness monster, and it grew up and became the Altamahaha, and maybe there's two of them, and they had some babies or whatever. Um, but I definitely, I think this is one of those cases that I don't think you can discredit it. I don't think you can prove it's true. I think you kind of got to go figure it out for yourself.
For sure. Maybe you and me make a trip out there one of these days.
Dude,
So
I really would like for us to eventually start hunting cryptids.
hey man, we'll see what the future holds. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap up Altamahaha so we can move along. But for me, most of the cryptids we've talked about, I'm just like, okay, people like the knot deer. As much as I love the knot deer, like
Poor
most of the
Steven.
incidents we talked about, I'm like, okay, somebody was like high or it was late at night or something. This one, with the newspaper reports, with the number of people that have seen it, with the Native Americans, particularly the Tama Indians, talking about a giant snake creature that lives in the Altamaha River. To me, I'm like, okay, something's there. And maybe it's not like this gigantic snake like creature at five humps, but there's something in that water that's not a crocodile or an alligator or things like that. It's something that I think has not been identified yet. And so
Yeah.
so for me, I'm skeptical, but I'm like something's in there.
Oh yeah, there's definitely something. And who knows? Maybe we'll catch it on video and we'll end up in the
And
newspaper.
to this day, the last reported time I saw of somebody mentioning they had seen it, it's been a little while now. But the last time was 2010. There was a group of Boy Scouts that reported seeing it. Um, so it's been about 14 years now. But it seems like about every 10 years it gets seen. So maybe we're at a 2024 sighting. I don't
Oh
know.
man, I'm telling you though, it's now the Altamaha. That's like the one that I've always known about, just because I feel like that's Georgia's known cryptid.
It's
Like
definitely the most famous one. I
like
took
I've seen like people talk about like, oh, famous, like there's like a person, he's got like, there's a company out there that makes like a map, and it's got like all the different cryptids across the country, and like for us it's always the Altamaha, like no matter what. we're known for the Altamahaha. So I'm curious to see what other three cryptids we've got.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We will speed along. So, um, this one I'm very skeptical of. Uh, there just hasn't been as many reports. Now, I am intrigued because this one, like the Altamahaha, has had reports of it since the 1800s, and there's been continued reports to this day. So for me, I'm like, okay, at the very least, this is not something that somebody saw once or twice. This is pretty consistent reportings. There's not many well documented ones. Like, unlike the Altamahaha, which you had very credible people report its
Mm-hmm.
existence, this one mostly is just like some uncle and his nephew, like on a boat.
We
Saying,
were out there drinking beer, snorting some crack, and I swear I saw the thing.
right. But next up, we have what's called the Georgia Swamp Thing. So, for those of you that are not familiar with Georgia's landscape, we have a swamp here, the Okefenokee Swamp. And I know I'm saying that right because when I took Georgia history in eighth grade, the number of times my teacher said Okefenokee Swamp, like, just seared that name into my mind. I've
You know,
never Okefenokee
you know
Swamp.
that you and I could go look for this thing if we wanted to, because this is a little tidbit. Don't go dox my grandmother, okay? But they live. You know, my grandmother lives near the swamp.
Okay.
And that's actually like my family's moved around Georgia. Like for people that don't know, my family's moved around Georgia, and one town we kind of lived in is a small little town called Folkestone. Literally, I think it has like one red light. The whole reason that it's even popular is because 301 passes through it, but it is known
Okay.
as the gateway to the swamp. Um, so little fun fact there.
Neat. So, little Will the Cowboy family history
History,
relating
yeah.
to the swamp. Yeah. Um, but yeah, the first time it was spotted was in the 1800s. I think it was 18. I gotta fact check this. I think it was 1847. But a group of fishermen recorded seeing a what they described as a 7-foot hairy primate walking through the brush of the Okefenokee swamp, and they reported smelling what smelled like rotting meat, which seems to be a pattern with this Georgia swamp thing. There's usually some kind of like overwhelming stench, usually described as rotting meat. What exactly that is, that's kind of what people have said whenever they've spotted this thing. Um, there's really not too much else to say about it. Some people think that it's Bigfoot just in Georgia. Uh, I know. Will, you have a friend that claims to have seen Bigfoot here.
Yep, yep. He claims he lives in his backyard.
Yeah, you wanna share a quick story about that? Maybe he actually saw the Georgia Swamp thing, and he
Who
just think
he who knows? He could have. So there's a guy that works for us on the farm. I won't drop his name because Um, but yeah, no, he like is a full like I've never like Steven, we were making jokes that Steven's like a not deer fanatic. This guy is a Bigfoot fanatic. He actually joked with us because he didn't work on the farm one weekend because him and his wife went up to North Georgia to the Bigfoot Museum. He literally left his daughter's number and told Bigfoot to call her. So
he wants some Nephilim babies.
oh man,
He
he's
wants
something
a
else.
half Bigfoot or half Georgia Swamp thing, half human grand
Listen,
synchronized.
sometimes with what he says, and if he's watching this, if he's like he wants to watch the podcast and he wants to be on here one day, but if he's watching this, listen, man, I love you, but there's some things that you say that I just kind of like question, and I'm just like, are you sure? So I know that one day that we're gonna see Bigfoot on the farm, and he's just gonna look at us and be like, I told you so, and I'm gonna be like, I'm never gonna doubt you again a day in your life.
If it smells like rotting meat, it's the Georgia Swamp thing
What's
rather.
funny is when you mention that because you texted me the list of cryptids you were going to cover today, and I called it the skunk ape.
That has been the alternative name for it. So there's a similar creature on
in the
the Florida side
Everglades.
of the Okefenokee Swamp because
Mhm.
the Okefenokee Swamp actually goes into Florida as well.
I've heard
And
I've heard of the skunk ape being in the Everglades. That's like when you text me skunk ape, I was kind of like, wait, Georgia has a skunk ape because I knew that people have seen it down in the Everglades of Florida.
yeah, so people are not sure if it's the same creature or if it's different, but kind of the same. The reports of a really bad smell have been reported with the Georgia Swamp Thing and also on the Florida side of it, and then also in the Everglades. So some people think that the Georgia Swamp Thing is really just the skunk ape, but hopping the border over to the far superior state of Georgia.
Yeah.
If there's any Florida fans listening to this, had to throw that dig in there.
Hey man, listen, my dad went to UF, so like go Gators, you know.
My dad's a UGA fan, even though he never went to UGA. He
So well,
immigrated here from India, and he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna cheer for these Bulldogs because why
he's
not?
a bandwagon. He said, "I'm in Georgia. I'm gonna root for the Georgia Bulldogs."
There you go.
I'm
So,
kidding. We love Steven's dad.
yeah.
Um, I mean, it could
So
be. It could be the same guy. You know, they've got
I'm surprised
it's three different
if it
families,
exists.
man. They're like, all right, we're gonna go visit your cousins up there in Georgia.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm going to say why I'm skeptical very quickly, and then we'll move on to the 2.5 cryptid. I'm skeptical because, again, not as much credibility with some of these witnesses. I, I am a fan of the fact that it's been seen so many times for 200 years. So, to me, that at least gives it a lot more credibility than some of the other Georgia cryptids I was looking into. But the reports are usually pretty vague. It's like, oh, big, giant, hairy creature, and I'm like, okay, that could be a panther or a jaguar. That could be a bear, and you're just thinking it looks like Bigfoot. So for me, I'm pretty skeptical. The rotting meat thing is interesting to me, but if I'm thinking of like a bear having a fresh kill, and it
Yeah.
starts rotting, I'm like, okay, that could explain the smell. So the Altamahaha, I believe there's something there. With this one, I'm thinking it's probably a lot of people looking at a bear and thinking it's Bigfoot
Mhm.
or something. So I'm
Yeah.
skeptical of this one, but I don't know. What do you think, Will?
I mean, I can get where you're coming from. You know, like I think with a lot of these, you know, I could take it, look at it, and be like, well, there's this proof that says it could be true. There's this proof that says it can't be true. And, you know, like with Altamahaha, it was a lot more of proving that it could be true with not a lot of things proving it couldn't be true. And I think the thing with like the skunk ape, you know, the Georgia swamp thing, you know, I think the big thing about it is, you know, like I know that there are bears in the Okefenokee swamp. You know, there
Right.
are black bears, you know, and now, like when you said a panther or a jaguar, well, that can't really do it because they're like, you know, a panther's very low to the ground when they kind of walk. Now, a bear I could see standing
That's fair.
and
That's
seeing a bear and being like, okay, that's a Georgia swamp ape, you know. So I think I definitely lean a little bit more towards it not being real. Um,
okay.
Now
Look,
Bigfoot, see, now, like Bigfoot, I could definitely say is real, and that's where like I will say
we
I'm
got to
not
do
too
an
sure.
episode at some point.
We'll do a Bigfoot episode for sure. But now with the skunk ape, I'm very much on the fence with it because the only reason why I could see a skunk ape actually existing is if Bigfoot actually exists as well. Because my theory would be
Yeah.
that Bigfoot came down and adapted to being in the swamp, and then he became the swamp ape. You know?
I mean, yeah. If there are big apes in the United States, like I mean, let's say Bigfoot gets proven real tomorrow. It is not far fetched to think that other big apes are in the South. Like let's say they find like Bigfoot in Arizona or something. I'm like, okay, well if there can be big primates living in Arizona, why not in Georgia or why not in Florida?
Mm-hmm.
You know? So
Yeah, and I'll always kind of believe that there's a possibility that Bigfoot could be real. And having that possibility in the thought of my head that Bigfoot could be real, it kind of gives a little bit of the possibility of me thinking that the skunk ape could be real. But there's a lot more where it's like I need a lot more evidence than just a bunch of hunters going in the woods who are probably drunk off their ass, probably high, who knows, that are not really kind of thinking straight, and they see a bear and think, "Oh my gosh, it's the skunk ape," you know.
For sure. So, okay, I'm gonna probably just spend 30 seconds on this thing because I honestly think if the Georgia Swamp Thing exists, this next cryptid is just that. But we have the Georgia Pigman, uh, and it has also been seen in the Okefenokee Swamp. So I think you guys can probably start to see why I think this is the same creature. But um, it's described as a ape-like creature with a pig face. Like if you looked at this creature, it's ape-like in appearance. It's tall, it's hairy, but when you look at its face, it has like a pig snout and like pig-looking eyes. Um, to me, I'm like, okay, you know, not as much reports of this one as the Georgia Swamp Thing. But I think like let's say the Georgia Swamp Thing exists. I think maybe people are looking at it and for whatever reason they're just seeing a distorted version of it. So they're like, "Oh, Pigman, it's totally different from the Georgia
The
Swamp."
drugs are a little too strong that night.
Yeah, but there's very few reports of the Pigman, and it's literally in the same area as the Georgia Swamp Thing. So for me, I'm like, I don't think it's a distinct creature. I think it's again, if the Georgia Swamp Thing exists, I think it's just a Georgia Swamp Thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think
So
that's a great way to kind of sum it up.
So yeah, when Will was asking me how are we talking about 2.5 cryptids today? That's how. Yeah, I was like I think I'll throw out the pigment there just because, but I really don't think it warrants being its own cryptid. So
Yeah,
I'll give it a half a cryptid.
half a cryptid. I don't think Pigman's real. I think
I
that
mean, go ahead.
I think Pigman's not real. All right, this is probably the first cryptid you're going to hear me say that it's not real, and I don't think Pigman's real
Yeah,
because I think people are probably seeing the skunk ape and they're just looking a little too quick, and they're like, "Oh, it's got a snout," and they're too
watch
scared to do.
watch us go to the Okefenokee swamp and both the Georgia Swamp Thing and the Pigman walk up to us at the same time,
Oh,
and we're like, "Dang, we were." It's like, well,
well, we were wrong.
we were wrong. Yeah,
You could
but
like camp in the swamp.
you can what? Oh, we
We can.
could.
Mhm.
I mean, hey, the longer we are in the swamp, the more likely we are to see it if it
You
exists.
guys are fixing to not get 2 weeks of episodes because Steve and I are going to be in the woods for 2 weeks.
So, I mean, hey, I'd be down for a trip to the Okefenokee
Hey,
swamp.
man, I'm telling, like, I really would like us to eventually, like,
You can visit your grandmother.
I know, right?
Yeah,
And like, we could start hunting cryptids.
that might be our maybe not our next podcast, but our next series, whatever form that might take shape. Um, okay, well, we have one last creature to talk about, and then we will wrap up this Georgia cryptids episode. But um, we're gonna talk about what's the Georgia werewolf,
Oh boy.
and I I think something happened in this town because pretty much the whole town was talking about this young lady. Yes, the Georgia werewolf is this young girl. So,
It's funny.
okay, go ahead.
Before the episode, when you're like werewolf and it was a lady, I was like, is there like a female version of werewolf? And all I could find is a werewoman.
Werewolf. Oh, yeah. So,
But it doesn't just apply to wolves. Apparently, a werewoman can be any woman that turns into any animal.
into any animal. Yeah,
So she
no.
could turn into a cockatoo, and she's a werewoman.
Okay, so here we go with the Georgia werewolf. I would believe. Well, I don't know if I would believe this one more than the Georgia skunk ape because I mean, like, it's not like this thing is being seen anymore. But at the time it was being seen, there was a lot of people talking about it, and there's just weird stuff that was going on. So our story takes place in Talbot County, which is a rural county between in southwest Georgia between Macon and Columbus. So our friend Landon, if you are watching this, if you wanted to travel between,
Hey, if you don't want to be single no more, you don't mind a little hair,
yeah. So
the wilderness must be explored.
there you go. But yeah, in Talbot County in the late 1800s, this young lady named Emily Isabella Burt moved there with her family. And pretty much when she and her family moved to the scene, weird stuff started to happen in the town. So I don't know if Paul will be able to get us a picture later. Um, if he can,
Right.
you can see a picture of this young lady. But she it's not the well, let's just say she wouldn't be on the cover of any magazine models. Uh, that's probably the
See,
nicest way.
see, the sad thing about this being is that like I don't have a picture slid across to me, so I have no clue.
Look it up later.
I'll look her up.
Yeah, but you know, not not the most attractive woman on the planet. Which okay, you know, if if everybody was attractive, then like average would just be attractive. But
Listen, everybody's attracted to somebody some way. So in a way, we are all attractive. Just depends on
well,
who finds us attractive.
so Emily Bird here was described as having dark hair, bushy eyebrows, and sharp white canine teeth that made her smile very, very disturbing. Uh, so
Sounds just like a furry.
I. Our friend Jared would be very excited to hear it. No, I'm just kidding.
Jared's like a girlfriend for me.
Jared, if you're listening to this podcast, we love you, buddy.
Hey,
Um,
answer our phone calls. We want to hire you.
but so yeah, this girl appears into the town. Kind of weird looking, kind of strange, kind of keeps to herself. And the townspeople are like, okay, whatever. This family is doing whatever they can. Um, oh, actually, Emily Bert's mother took her to the local dentist to see if they could get her teeth fixed. And they weren't able to do that.
Mm.
But this is where the story starts to get strange. Several, Emily Bird comes to the town, and as the coming days and weeks approach, several of the townspeople start to report that their sheep are being killed. So they go to bed and they wake up, and their sheep have been torn apart. This wasn't happening prior to Emily Bird arriving. Emily Bird comes to town, and all of a sudden, this starts to happen.
Oh boy.
Yeah, the same night that these sheep are being killed, like because this is happening over a period of several nights. During the times when that's happening, Emily is reported to have fallen ill. Is she's also suffering from restless nights, and there are several times when her mother catches her leaving the room and wandering through the county because she can't sleep.
Oh.
So she's usually out and about when these killings are happening. So, slowly people start to get a little bit suspicious. They're like, okay, this young woman is running around the town at night. Our sheep are being killed. Is there a connection here? Is there something happening? So uh, people start to pay a little bit of attention. People are not going to sleep anymore. They're watching over their sheep. But what starts to happen is there starts to be reports of this large wolf-like animal that stands on his hind legs, coming in and killing these sheep.
Oh
Uh,
heck nah.
yeah, so that is reported by a man named William Gorman. That is reported by a woman named Mildred, uh, and that's reported by several of the townspeople as having witnessed this creature lurking in the woods. So to me, that's where I start to move from skeptic to, is there some credibility to this story? You have several townspeople all reporting the same thing about this young woman, about sheep being killed in her town, all around the same time. Again, I don't know if that necessarily means werewolf, but to me something's happening.
Yeah, something's a little fishy there.
Right. So all right, we're gonna continue. So naturally, as this wolf creature starts to be reported, if you're a Will the Cowboy type of guy, you're like, you know what? Let's go grab some guns and let's go kill this thing.
Heck yeah, let's go murder this wolf mounted on the wall.
Yeah, I think if animals were being killed in your area, Will, and people started to report this pretty frequently,
Oh yeah, we get
I
guns.
definitely see you gathering a group of people to
Oh
and
yeah,
go.
we would go hunt this thing down. We would track it, kill it, be done with it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So this is where things start to get really spicy for me, and this is where I'm like, okay, this is absolutely insane.
How
So
spicy we talking? We talking like white people pepper spicy or like Indian curry spicy?
I'll let you just you can give me a rating after I say this. So sure enough, you have this big group of men, hunters, and they see it. They see the werewolf, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they shoot at it naturally, and they hear the werewolf howl in pain, indicating that they probably hit it. Uh, Now this is where I'm a little bit skeptical, but at least one of the hunters reported that they hit the creature kind of near the top left of his eyebrow. That's going to be important later. Um, so now only one of the hunters said this, but he's like, "Yeah, we definitely at least hit the werewolf there." So the werewolf runs off. They try to go find it, but they're not able to find it later. The same night that that happens, uh, Emily Bert's mother wakes up, goes to check on Emily, sees she's not in her bed. She's like, okay, she's wandering again. She goes, kind of checks through the woods, and she finds her daughter, Emily Burt, lying on the ground unconscious in a pool of blood. She's like, oh my
Mm.
gosh, what happened? She takes her to a medic. They treat her. They they take her to the local physician. Um, they think about like sending her maybe to uh, Paris or somewhere to um, have her treated. And when they examine her, she has a bullet wound in her left eyebrow area.
Mm-mm. This is getting curry spicy.
Yeah, the same place where the hunter said he had shot the werewolf. Um, they do end up taking her to Paris. They treat her. She returns, and she's supposedly cured. She starts kind of having those weird restless nights. Animals stop being killed in the town, and like all of that just kind of ends.
That's weird.
So I'm still skeptical because part of me wonders how much of that is coincidence. Although there was too many strange coincidences.
Yeah, there's a lot of yeah.
Um, but this is where we'll kind of wrap this up. So Emily dies in 1911. She's buried, but to this day, paranormal paranormal incidents are reported around her grave.
I know where we're going.
So if you and me went to her grave in Talbot County today, people said have reported having a strange sense of unease or sickness after going to her graveyard. Uh, some people have said that if you go to a graveyard on a full moon, you can hear not werewolves, but you can hear wolves howling in the distance near her grave. If you go to her grave on a full moon, so to this day, yeah, there's just weird stuff like that that people continue to experience to this day. And again, Emily died 113 years ago. In
Wow.
the year of our Lord 2024, people still report weird stuff happening. So, well, what are your quick thoughts? That's pretty much all I have on this so-called Georgia werewolf.
Man, there are a lot of coincidences in this whole thing. Like I mean, it was like one thing, like, you could be just okay. Well, maybe a coyote's out there and is tearing up the sheep. Is there like a description on how the sheep were torn apart? Like, was it like something had eaten the sheep, or was it just like something just destroyed a sheep?
Yeah, from what I saw, there's just reports that the sheep had been killed, in
Mm,
presumably by a large wolf or werewolf-like creature. Because it's Talbot County, I don't know how well they actually documented this stuff, other than like Emily Burt was here and this was happening. So, yeah, I don't have any super descriptive things, but it definitely was torn apart by some kind of large animal.
yeah. See, that's where like it really kind of, for the longest time you're sitting there like, okay, maybe it's a coincidence. It just happens to be that maybe there's a coyote that is just out there that's just like we got a bad coyote problem right now, and it just so happens that Emily shows up just at that moment. But then throughout here in the story, you're kind of like, okay, maybe that's the case. And then when they go hunt the creature, and there's a report that they shot the wolf, in the temple, and then Emily's mother goes, okay, she's out there wandering around again, and she finds her in the woods, unconscious, bleeding, with a bullet hole in the head, same spot, everything. That's what kind of like really kind of gets me there.
Yeah. So, for me, I I think there was something weird that was happening with her arrival, and I'm not convinced she was a werewolf necessarily. Although I mean, considering the reports of are accurate about where they shot the wolf and where she was hurt, um, that could certainly be the case. But yeah, I do feel like there are at least some other possible alternatives, like what you just said. Maybe there was some other animal that just happened to start attacking when she was in town. Uh,
Yeah.
maybe as time went on, maybe some of the townspeople got details mixed up and they started to associate her with that animal. So there's other explanations out there that prevent me from being like a believer fully.
Yeah.
But at the very least, there are enough at least weird coincidences where I'm like, if these facts are accurate, Emily Burt might be a werewolf, man.
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
mean, like a lot of it's like, okay, her arriving, the attack starting, coincidence maybe, but for her mother to account, because that's like the thing as a parent, you do whatever you can to defend your kid, and that's like it's weird that the mother's like, yes, I have gone out looking for her because she'll get up in the middle of the night and wander. We took her to get her teeth fixed, it didn't work. All these things start adding up, and it really makes you start thinking, was it a coincidence that the attack started as soon as she arrived? And then what makes it even crazier is what happened in Paris, you know? Because she left, as soon as she leaves, everything stops. She comes back and everything's normal and fine, and she's fine again. And it just really makes you wonder, like, werewolf could you actually be a werewolf and be cured of it? You know?
Seems like that was the case with her. Yeah, I guess what happens in Paris stays in Paris. But so,
Oh
well,
yeah.
I think that will about do it. One of the things I love about this episode, Will, is that I think a lot of the things we talk about, we're not anywhere close to those things. So we'd have to peel off a good chunk of change to like go visit
But now we
more
don't have to.
or something like that. Yeah, which but with the creatures we talked about today, we could make a trip over to Talbot County. We could go to the Altamaha River. We could go to the Okefenokee Swamp. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's something that excites me. Is every story we talked about today, we're not that far from driving over there and exploring some of this stuff ourselves.
Yeah, I mean and that's like one thing I do eventually hope is that, like, Beyond the Campfire, me and Steve were talking about this beforehand. And I had mentioned I was going to mention to you guys that I will promise to you that if you can get our numbers, if you guys watch the podcast, if you share it with for your friends, your family, your dog, your gerbil, we're Beyond the Campfire. We're on Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, iHeartRadio. Um, where else are we? Castbox. We're on all these different platforms. And if we can get our numbers up, if we can get our views up, um, we're on Instagram at beyond.th3.campfire. We're on TikTok at Beyond the Campfire Podcast. We're on Twitter at Beyond Campfire. Like, we're all over the place. If you guys could get our numbers to where they need to be, I can tell you in a year and a half, there might be more podcast shows. There might be some new interesting content ideas. Um, because like I told Steven, man, I want to do this full time. I want to make the best content we can. I want to, make everybody have fun. And who knows, maybe we won't just do search for some Georgia cryptids. Who knows? Maybe we might hop across the pond here and go look for the banshee or something.
Yes, sir.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting knowing that there are these cryptids right here in our backyard, and we could end up seeing one. So
There we go. Yeah. Cool. That'll do it. So yeah, once again, I'm one of your co-hosts, Sahil Steven.
I'm the other one, the cowboy William.
And yeah, thanks for joining us on this edition of Beyond the Campfire. Hope to hear from you next week.
Yeah, stay safe out there. Don't let the hairy ladies get you.